In the Know, a radio program talking to the newsmakers in Ogle, Lee, DeKalb counties and beyond, keeping you in the know. Here's your host, Charles Van Horn.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday. In studio, Dr. Jason Harper, Superintendent of Rochelle Schools. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
Doing great. 2 districts, 1 superintendent, and a lot of duties. First off, a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up at, and what led you to Rochelle School District?
Well, I'm a hometown boy.
Yeah.
So I was born and raised in Rochelle. My folks were from the Rochelle area predominantly. So, went through the old RTHS over by where the Walgreens is now in the rec center, for those listening who kind of remember that building. And so was a graduate from RTHS and went to Knox College after that, a very small school over in Galesburg, Illinois, and wanted to become an educator and spent some time as a special educator, worked within the county and then up north of Rockford in the McChesney Park area. And there was a position that came open at RTHS. I applied for it and was lucky enough to get it, and kind of the rest is history from there. So, my wife's from the Rochelle area, and our 4 boys hopefully will grow up as hubs and graduate one day from RTHS.
It's got to be nice to be sort of a catalyst for change in your own hometown and your own school districts. Contrast your time in school in Rochelle to the way you think the students are experiencing Rochelle high school life now.
Well, I don't want to date myself here, but obviously about a generation ago or so, a little bit more now, I graduated from RTHS. And of course, at the cusp of Y2K and, from the late 90s to the 2000s, so much has changed, right? From predominantly technology being the major aspect, I think that's changed things both for students at our school and when they go home, they're surrounded by technology. They have their phones in their hands, just as adults do. But, students especially have their phones and totally interconnected through social media, text messaging, multimedia platforms, and all that type of thing. And so their lives, their experience, the way they interact with their buddies and people far outside of the borders of Rochelle is completely different than, again, just a generation ago and before. And so I would say that's probably, I feel like, the biggest change. And some of that's obviously crept into our educational process. Here in Rochelle, we have a 1-to-1 model, just like about everybody does in the post-pandemic world, where, students are having a computer in their hands predominantly every class period. And so it's just changed the way we've interacted. And I would imagine that in 20 years, the future superintendent will come back and say AI has totally changed the way in which students interact and adults interact, at work.
Or cheat on book reports.
Well, whatever it may be, that was the concern about Google, 20-some years ago is, proper citations and where are we getting our information from. And
back in my day, we had to plagiarize by hand, you young ruffians.
Yeah, so we had it good 20 years ago, and it seems like this generation might have it better in that regard. Jokes aside, but I would say that's probably the biggest thing. And so other than that, kids are still kids. Anybody who's interacted with a teenager lately knows that their friends are their kind of their social network is their biggest source of what they're interested in, what are their friends thinking about, this, that, or the other, and interacting with friends and things of that nature. When we get kids in the hallways up at the high school or, down to preschool, kids are still kids, and so that's a refreshing part too. Kind of the old adage, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And so, in that regard, I think when teachers, when educators like myself get into this profession for the joy of working with kids, whatever, subject matter it is or grade level that our teachers are coming into the profession for, I think at the end of the day, they're still getting that great experience with kids. And so that's obviously an enriching part.
So the hallways still smell the same.
I'm not sure where you went, but I feel like, I don't know, they smell how they smell. Yeah. Teenage kids, sometimes come with their own smell. So that's part of the gig. We all know that getting into it.
Having to deal with a large school system. Let's be real. Rochelle has a lot of moving parts in their education system. A lot of different buildings with students with different needs and different capabilities. What do you think are some of the strengths of the Rochelle school system in regards to students of varying degrees of capability, from those who need advanced help to those who, quite frankly, are probably smarter than the teachers?
Well, I think one of the things that I love about Rochelle is right now it's a great reflection of who we are across our state and who we are across our country. As you mentioned, our students come to our schools regardless of whatever their folks make or don't make as part of their economic outlook. Their racial, religious backgrounds are all different. And so I think we're not a perfect microcosm of the country or state, but we're a pretty darn good one. And so with those varying abilities, varying backgrounds, comes a lot of great opportunities for the kids to kind of get to know one another. And, we have a strong population of our students who come from Spanish-speaking backgrounds, which is no secret, which has kind of led the foundations for our dual language program. Our dual language program comes in every year with a waiting list. Every year we're amazed that students from whatever linguistic background are electing to go into this dual language model. And for those families and students who don't think that's the right fit for them, obviously we feel very confident that we have a strong monolingual program too. So kind of taking what's the strengths of our communities, the diversity within all of our communities. And don't forget, obviously at the high school level, now not speaking as much for the elementary level, but at the high school level, we have a very strong rural connection with our kind of quote unquote feeder school system that the high school uses. We have a very strong connection with agriculture in kind of the agriculture fields, and just kind of growing up in a smaller, classroom setting, a smaller community setting where folks all know one another and want to support one another. And that stuff kind of bleeds in naturally into the school. And so, there's a lot of strengths. I could, fill up maybe multiple programs for you on just the strengths and things I love about Rochelle. But I would say kind of off the top of my head, those would be some of the things I would cite. And of course, one thing I haven't gotten to is, a really great educational staff.
Yeah.
Our faculty and staff are just fantastic. They come here, they get invested in the community. Many of them live here. They understand the strengths and challenges of our community. They understand and have connections with our kids outside of the classroom, give up their time for extracurriculars and things of that nature. So, of course, the diverse expert faculty is another fantastic strength of what we have going on here in Rochelle.
Rochelle has a number of buildings, number of campuses, and every year, it's always seems like more money is poured into some project or another. And it has to be. You have to maintain the buildings and the facilities. Some are older than others. A lot of big projects in the works over the summer. Can you highlight some of those projects? And are they going to be done on time? With this weather, that always turns into a challenge when schools undertake these large projects, and they'll be like, school will open on time, don't worry. And then come August, they worry.
Yes, of course. Well, we're obviously watching all our projects very closely and talking with those contractors and things that are running those. But so we feel right now confident that we'll be able to open all of our facilities just as we normally do. So, you've cited a couple big outdoor projects, but first I want to make mention of our two great maintenance staffs that are literally turning the buildings over on the inside, which we all can't see when driving by from literal top to bottom. And so a lot of indoor improvements, just general maintenance, preventative maintenance, things like that happening. And so sometimes our maintenance crews don't necessarily get the credit that they deserve. So I want to make sure first to point out all the great work that they do. But second, obviously we have two bigger outdoor projects going on right now. One's at the high school with a large pavement project, and that pavement project stretches from kind of what we call the quote unquote main entrance to the high school campus all the way through the front circle drive, and then back to kind of where the football stadium is and where the student parking lot begins. And so that project's nearing its completion, and that should be done probably this week. Just this last week, they did the painting and kind of striping that needs to go down, some final checks around the curbs and things of that nature. I think yesterday they just poured some concrete around some of the sewer spots out there. So I think we'll be good on that one. Though another major project, as you know, is happening over at Tilton School.
Yeah.
We're expanding the parking lot and trying to get some of that heavy bus traffic off of the road that's been happening for, since
Yeah.
The opening of that building and up off the curb into that parking lot area. So there's curbs going in, concrete sidewalks being poured today. Those crews have been working long, hard hours in the heat. And so I think that one's trending in the right direction. Still a couple weeks to go before we start getting teachers back and folks in and out of the building. So I think we're in a good position for those two projects to be finished on time.
The pond project behind the high school, that's going to be getting worked on as well, right? And we've had plenty of water this last week or so.
Yeah, so, the detention pond project, I just got an update yesterday, won't start for a little bit longer.
Okay,
Obviously,
so
it's going to be awful tough to get back there and dig with all the water that we've had. And if anybody's driven over, around, by, or through Kite Creek here in the last couple of days, obviously that portion of our high school campus is directly adjacent and abuts up against the creek. And so, unfortunately with the rains, that's going to postpone or kind of delay that project a little bit. But the one thing that's a little bit nice about that project is we're not so dependent on getting that finished before the school year starts. So strategically, that was kind of the last in line. And, Mother Nature has her plans too. So we'll just kind of follow her lead.
How does enrollment look? I know that a lot of school administrations, they get that crystal ball and they look at preschool and they look at first grade and try to ballpark the needs of the community and expansion or contraction even. How do the Rochelle schools look? Are they getting bigger? Are they getting smaller? What does it look like for the next 12 years? Yeah,
so in general, over the next 12 years, to kind of use your number here, we will continue to contract. Our enrollment will decrease. For those who have been kind of following along with what's happening in the schools here in Rochelle, 231 and 212, we hit a high water mark around 07, 08, 08, 09, and from there it's been a pretty steady decline since. There's a lot of variables that impact that. Obviously, you've already referenced birth rate and some of those types of things. We also know that there's been a pretty serious exodus from Illinois during that same span. So we're kind of riding that down trend. Last year, we saw kind of roughly a plateauing of our numbers. But in general, over the next 5 to 6 years, we'll continue to see a decrease. And so for those listening who kind of remember their high school enrollment and whatever it might have been at the high school, right now we're at about 850-ish, middle 800s, and we'll start creeping down towards the 800s here, continue to creep down there. So class sizes, whether, regardless of what feeder school it is, all 6 of them, Creston, Edgewood, Stewart, Kings, Rochelle, and St. Paul, we all talk with one another and kind of talk about enrollment trends, and just in general, it's down. And that's again the case across the nation is, kind of this quote unquote enrollment cliff across the nation. And so there's just fewer kids around. So
let's take a moment to talk about community involvement. A lot of volunteers. I mean, obviously the staff is, as you know, deserve high praise for their hard work, whether they be teachers, administration, or maintenance, or any other way they serve the school. But there's also volunteers as well who do a lot for the school systems. What area do you guys need volunteers for? How can parents or people of the community get involved?
Yeah, well, generally, we just tell parents to follow their interests, community members to follow their interests. So if someone's interested in the band program, then we ask them, let's get you connected with the band, the RTHS Band Booster Club, right? Same thing with the Athletic Booster Club. There's an FFA alumni chapter. So there's a bunch of different ways to kind of follow your or maybe your child's passions and support them through their fundraising, but also just volunteering, running concession stands, just helping organize events and things of that nature. Down at the lower level, the predominant way is through the parent-teacher organization, PTO. And we also have a pretty vibrant BPAC, which is our Bilingual Parent Advisory Committee. And so, and there's kind of built off of that is there's this Dual Language Family Alliance. So there's these parental groups where, again, depending on what you're interested in, depending on what language you feel most comfortable interacting with our staff members and kind of volunteering at, you can find these variety of places to kind of come and help. And then, of course, obviously we need chaperones on field trips and things of that nature. So we're constantly sending notes home to see if anybody's willing to kind of give up some of their time in that regard. The Hub program, our after-school program, is another great opportunity for people to come and volunteer. This is an enrichment program. And so, we have some people who have a passion for gardening, cooking, robotics, et cetera, whatever it is. And so, sometimes we're able to match students through that program to somebody kind of on a, volunteer basis to connect, again, a skill set, an interest, a passion with a group of kids that would benefit from that.
Dr. Jason Harper, Rochelle Schools Superintendent, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Great conversation. Look forward to having you back.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's In the Know. The program returns next week at this time with another great conversation with someone from your community.